It happens when you're standing in a room with your family and someone else is being praised. Someone else is being noticed. And you realize quietly, without drama, that no one is looking at you. Not because you failed, not because you didn't try, but because you were never the one who demanded attention. If you were the sibling who was fine, too, the one who didn't cause problems, the one assumed to be strong, this video is for you. Because that moment doesn't disappear. Maybe I matter less. This is the psychological world of the undervalued sibling, and it shapes how you see yourself, your relationships, and how much space you believe you're allowed to take. Being undervalued doesn't always come from cruelty. More often, it comes from comparison. One child becomes the smart one. Another becomes the difficult one. And one quietly becomes the one who will be okay. Parents don't usually say this out loud. They don't intend harm. But attention follows urgency. And over time, emotional investment flows unevenly. 2. The child who receives less attention doesn't think, "My parents are overwhelmed." They think, "Something about me must not be enough." Children are meaning-making machines. They don't analyze systems, they internalize outcomes. That belief doesn't vanish with age. It matures. It disguises itself as independence, self-reliance. On the surface, the undervalued sibling often appears calm, capable, low maintenance. Inside, there's a constant negotiation. Don't ask for too much. Don't take up space. Psychologically, this creates an internal split. One part of you becomes hyper-responsible. Another part remains emotionally hungry, but unsure if it's allowed to exist. You don't stop having needs. You stop expressing them. Research in developmental psychology shows that children who receive inconsistent emotional validation develop heightened self-monitoring. They become skilled at reading rooms, sensing moods, and adjusting their behavior. This isn't empathy by choice. It's empathy by survival. You learn to become what the environment needs, not who you are. Over time, your self-worth becomes conditional. You feel valuable when you're useful. When you help. When you fix. When you stay steady and quiet. But when you're simply present doing nothing for anyone, there's discomfort. Because deep inside, your nervous system learned that love is earned, not given. One of the most painful parts of being the undervalued sibling is that nothing bad enough happened. There's no single memory to point to. No obvious neglect. Just absence. And absence is harder to grieve than pain, because pain validates itself. Absence makes you question your own perception. Am I exaggerating? Others had it worse. I shouldn't complain. So you invalidate yourself before anyone else can. This becomes a deeply internalized habit. You downplay your achievements. Compliments feel uncomfortable, almost suspicious. Your nervous system doesn't fully relax when attention comes your way, because being seen never lasted long before. There's also a quiet anger that many undervalued siblings carry. Not an explosive rage, but a dull, lingering weight. Anger at your caregivers, sure, but also at yourself. Why didn't I ask for more? Why was I always the one to understand? But children shouldn't have to demand care. They shouldn't have to compete for emotional presence. Instead, many undervalued siblings become emotional containers. You learn to listen early, to support, to hold space for others. In adulthood, this often turns into relationships where you're relied on but not fully known. People trust you. They lean on you, but they don't always ask how you are. And when they do, you hesitate because you were never asked enough to practice answering. Psychologists call this emotional invisibility. It's not chaos, not overt neglect, but simply being emotionally unattended. It creates a belief that being limpacked is virtuous, that needing less makes you easier to love. But emotional independence formed too early isn't maturity. It's adaptation. A child who stops asking for comfort isn't healed. They're just adjusting. Another pattern that emerges is comparison-based self-worth. And even when you succeed, something feels hollow. Because what you really wanted was never applause. It was acknowledgement without competition. This is why imposter feelings are so common among undervalued siblings. Not because you lack ability, but because your sense of worth was never stabilized from the start. And yet, there is a profound resilience here. Undervalued siblings often develop incredible depth, introspection, and emotional intelligence. You notice nuance. You hesitate before judging. You understand complexity, but emotional intelligence, without emotional nourishment, eventually leads to burnout. And then, there's a reckoning. It usually happens in adulthood, after giving too much for too long. You were invisible because the system around you rewarded volume, crisis, and immediacy. Families are emotional ecosystems. They don't always distribute attention fairly. Healing doesn't begin with confrontation. It begins with permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to need. Permission to stop being the one who always understands. You don't need to become louder to be worthy. Yeah. You don't need to compete to be chosen. You're quiet. Strength was never a requirement. It was a response. And responses can be rewritten. Being overlooked didn't define your value. It shaped your perception of it. And perceptions can change. You don't have to erase yourself anymore. Like coming home to a part of yourself that was always there, waiting to be seen. Thanks for watching.